Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. It is exactly on the clock that we're starting this webinar. So before everybody has a chance to connect, I would like to begin with a short video to introduce today's session. Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for coming to today's session. I can see that the participants are coming in and they're taking their time to set everything up. I just wanted to remind you that you've got a chat box that you can use at any point to interact with us. You've got a Q&A box, which you can use to ask any questions you might have. Today, we have a panel discussion in place. As you can see, we've got three wonderful guests joining us. But before I start asking them tricky questions, which they're going to try and answer from their different fields of expertise, I just wanted to introduce why we're here today and why we're taking part to this webinar. Well, Jove is a scientific video platform. The short video that I showed you is actually a collection it's like a patchwork of different things that we've got on our platform. And we believe that videos can be extremely relevant to education. Which is why today we're going to discuss this topic and see how multimedia can contribute to enhancing learning outcomes, making lessons more engaging. And we're also going to try and understand what makes for an engaging video and why videos can be part of the process at any level, from the student's perspective, from the faculty perspective, from anybody's perspective. So as I was saying, Jove is a scientific video platform. The acronym stands for Journal of Visualized Experiments. So it was actually born as a journal, but over time it expanded and it changed. So what we're going to discuss today, the topic, we will see some practical examples of what our speakers are going to talk about by showcasing a few examples of what a video could look like, whether that's an animation like the ones you've seen, or whether that's actually people explaining or repeating an experiment or doing something, or maybe analyzing a patient if it comes to something like areas of expertise such as psychology or medicine. So all of that to say, welcome everybody again, and allow me to introduce our three speakers for today's discussion. So with us today, we have Logan Fiorella, who's an associate professor at the University of Georgia, Lester Howard Andrist, program director at the University of Maryland, and Robin Kay, who is the Dean of Education at Ontario Tech University. So first of all, thank you, all of you, for joining us today and for coming to this webinar. It's a real pleasure to hear about this topic from people who actually work with this topic and with this field of education basically every day. The topic will be approached from different perspectives because we've got people dealing with the more sociological side of it, the more educational, the psychological bits that are related to video insertion and production. And so before I bore you too long, I would like to start with a question to our panel, which is, to all of you, what kind of benefits in your line of research, in your experience, have you identified from using videos and multimedia when teaching? I would like to begin for this question by asking Lester if he could begin, perhaps.
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. I look forward to talking to the other panelists about this topic. I think for so long I've been kind of working in a little bit of a vacuum, so it's nice to hear from others who've kind of been through this process of figuring out how to use video in the classroom. So what are some of the benefits? I think that for me, I'm based in the Department of Sociology. So I think about this in terms of social sciences, but I think that we could even expand the discussion further. I think from a social scientific or even a humanities perspective, um, really good work tends to be work that does two things in these fields, and that is the ability to visualize things that are very abstract often, and the ability to be very historically oriented, which if you get too abstract and you don't have the history, I mean, I think you run into problems. So so there's a good balance there. And I bring that up because video is excellent. I have found that it's an excellent way to control or to take advantage of giving visualizations for very abstract concepts. And from a spatial standpoint, you can kind of take a bird's eye view of a situation that may be unfolding on a society-wide scale. So there's that spatial ability to manipulate kind of space and give students an opportunity to see things from a new vantage point. From a historical standpoint, if you want to put history at the forefront of some of the processes that you might be trying to identify, well, video is an obvious, I think, great choice for that because you can speed up time with time lapse. You can slow down time and processes. And I can just to give one quick example. You can imagine if you're a researcher of violence and you're interested in how violence may spread as kind of a contagion sort of effect, that can be a very difficult thing for people to get their heads around about how that's happening. And one way in which you can look at that is, like I said, I can imagine a bird's eye view visualization of that kind of contagion effect. You could take any historical example, perhaps the Rwandan genocide, and you could look at it, like I said, from a bird's eye view. You can get a sense of the kinds of violence that's happening in a particular area and then ask, does proximity to that violence actually encourage more violence? And you may want to abstract this a little bit with dots because violence can have some negative impacts on learning if you're showing too much of that. But the point being that if you're trying to teach this kind of contagion idea, you could visually represent that really well in video. And I think it gets at something that you can't do as well if you're just trying to explain it. Most people imagine things from a first person perspective, and that's not always the best place to look at things. But then also with that contagion sort of example, you would be speeding things up too, because you don't have all day. You want to kind of watch this unfold at a much faster pace. And so just having that flexibility, I think video brings these specific tools which are particularly suited for teaching social science.
Thank you, Lester. Actually, you've already touched upon two extremely important points, which we're going to discuss in a few minutes when we go and see an example of what, like you said, a non-first person perspective looks like. One point being, we all are teaching a generation of people who have a different approach to the content. And you touched upon the fact that speeding things up can be beneficial, but also I imagine slowing things down might be beneficial. We're going to see how that can apply to a certain type of video or another. And something else that I think is very important here is Obviously, we discuss different approaches to learning and how different people can or cannot learn. But very, very rarely we say, oh, I'm a visual learner, hence I do this, hence I take practical steps towards this. And this is actually something that we encounter all the time. People saying, oh, I have so many visual learners in my class, but the spatial 3D things that I produce are not nearly enough compared, like if they want to see a molecule, they can't just see one molecule, they have to see 1,000 molecules through videos, through multimedia, to actually be able to visualize it more quickly. So I think those points are extremely important for the discussion. Thank you for your viewpoint. Robin, what would you say was the best, I would say, benefit that you've encountered in your experience?
Oh, I don't think there's any one best. But I'll just add to what Lester was saying, not repeat. I will note that I talked to this group just before about using videos. We had some idea about them being pretty important when I got a video, which I was shocked at because there was no YouTube at that point. Somebody sent the video over a link, and it was a review of classroom material that had the class had just written a test, and it was a review of the test material so that the teacher didn't have to waste time in class to go over that. And I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. And then I kept thinking, but our students were using it. So that was way back in 2004. YouTube was started 2005. But when looking at the benefits, I think you have to look at kind of the purpose of the video, and each of us may have different purposes. So there could be content type videos, basic kind of content videos, and it's also kind of what you do with it afterwards. So you would have to, it'd be some sort of quiz or something. Did you take in that content? Because just watching a video isn't enough. I think we've watched them, and it's, do we remember what's happening? How do we digest that? So if it's an application video, then afterwards we have to do something with it. If it's a discussion type video, maybe the kind that Lester might be talking about in his area, where then we need to discuss and then reflect upon it and challenge assumptions and that. So it's not just the video, it's what I'm doing with the video. Obviously, it works really, really well in a flipped classroom model. If you wanted to do something of that nature, it's a natural. And in terms of online learning, it's almost a must. And students aren't as enthusiastic about reading as they may have been in the past, or I don't think they're ever enthusiastic about textbooks, but it definitely opens up possibilities of how to do that. So the other possibility that we found very useful and really helpful for learning is creating your own videos, because there's a learning to understanding what you're doing, how to communicate, all those kinds of things, which has been really helpful for students. I would add another benefit is accessibility, which is a big thing. So if I'm watching something or listening to someone, I may not be taking it in the same rate, particularly if it's a scientific concept or whatever. If I can stop it, reflect it, rewind back, just all that's very simple. If English is my second language, I can have subtitles and I can start to, or take a look at. That's something that you might want it to. You stop a professor, can you repeat? But you can't do that. So, and I think from Lester's perspective, and also for us in education, depends, is multiple perspectives, because there's no shortage of videos out there. We obviously have to assess the quality and the validity and reliability. However, there's multiple perspectives, and videos really allow us to see the world the way, we tend to get in our own world, tunnel vision, and so it exposes. So those are sort of the benefits. I don't think I could pick one, but those are the ones that come to mind.
I was trying to challenge you to actually find the one, but I think they're all
I
extremely
refuse
valid.
the challenge. I'm an academic. There's no way. You can't just narrow me down to one.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I always try, but I never succeed. No, but every single point you raise is completely valid. And I mentioned earlier, we're gonna see an example of a video. I think subtitles there are one of the key elements. I always end up talking about the fact that In the US, the classrooms are becoming more and more diverse and more in need of having material that puts everybody on the same level. And just the fact that one can repeat, go back, re-listen, put subtitles, put even videos in a different language. Some people have, when I interacted with faculty in the past, some people have told me, oh, my student is learning English through the videos because that maybe they come from a foreign country, they're not as proficient as they wish they were. They're still learning English. And on a personal note, that's what happened to me when I started learning in English. A lot of the jargon, a lot of the specific words I didn't know because I'd never used them before.
Sure.
And having that extra level was absolutely paramount. So thanks for your perspective as well, Robin. I'm curious to hear what Logan would like to list as one of the biggest benefits. We've got a bunch already, but I'm sure you've got a few more.
Yeah, well, I'll try to build off of Robin and Lester. I'll give another kind of academic answer in that it depends. It really, it's not really that useful to talk about a certain media being effective just in and of itself, right? Because ultimately it depends on kind of the instructional methods that you use, how the video is designed, whether it's designed to support that particular instructional goal, whether it incorporates other types of instructional materials, like Robin was saying, to get students more engaged and actually check whether students understand what they're learning. So it's, yeah, I think we touched on a couple of themes. Yeah, video can be really versatile. It can be used in a lot of different ways, whether it's in online courses or, showing clips in class or flipped classroom. It can increase accessibility for students, right? You can have videos designed in different ways for students with different needs, such as, I think Robin mentioned with second language learners. So there's research showing that, for example, showing on-screen text can actually be kind of harmful from a lot of students, but if you're a second language learner, it actually can be helpful. So there's nuance, and it really depends on, from my standpoint, how do we, if we're going to use video, what are some basic principles based on what we know about how students learn, about their cognitive limitations and the unique affordances of video, so that we kind of leverage what's unique about videos and incorporate that with other types of instruction that we're using. So in my own research, I focus on kind of, okay, on one side, how do we design the video to kind of reduce some of the cognitive demands that are placed on videos when you have really long videos that have too much information, that have irrelevant information, that type of video is not likely to be effective, right? Another area is kind of how do we create more of a partnership between the instructor and the student, because one of the potential downsides of a video is that it's a little bit less personal, right? It's remote. So how can we use kind of instructional cues or social cues to support this feeling of that you're kind of with the instructor during the lesson? And then the third element of that I focus on is how do we incorporate effective learning activities within video? So how can you, like Robin was mentioning, it's not just watching a video in and of itself is a bit passive, right? So it has to be paired with appropriate activities, like, you can have students answer questions before a video or interspersed within the video or at the end of a video. Anyway, so I'll just kind of stop there, but there are lots of different ways that obviously to implement video, and it really depends on, are you designing in a way that supports kind of the underlying cognitive processes that are important for understanding?
Very, very, very good point, actually, Logan, because I think a lot of the people listening to us, but also the people who hopefully will watch the recording of this session, will be wondering, okay, yes, I do love the idea, but how do I practically implement that? What does that mean for my class? Because I understand I could be showing it during the lesson, but what does that mean for my class? So I think this is where we're going to head next, to seeing some practical tips on, what works, what versus what doesn't work in your experience. Before we move on to that though, and thanks for leading into that part of the conversation, I'd like to take just a couple of moments for the audience to actually see an example of a video and some related activities that we could be implementing. So we've discussed the benefits.
Alice, Sorry,
ahead.
your video didn't have sound the last time. You knew that?
I do know that. I am trying to
Okay.
understand why the ticking. Thank you
Oh,
for
you have to
mentioning that.
share. You
So
have to share
I
it.
did share the sound, but I think some settings are a little off today. So
Okay.
we're gonna give
Just
it
wanted you
one
to be
more
aware.
go.
That's all. Sorry.
But thank you, thank you. We're going to give it one more go, and hopefully this time it will work. But yeah, I just wanted to start from some examples. So we're talking about a situation where, let's say I'm a professor and I've always wanted to understand how, you know, a video can be beneficial, but I also don't want to get too far away from my students. Like Logan said, it's important to keep that interaction. So an example of a video, I'm just going to open one of the many sections that we've got here. Primarily, obviously, Jove is a STEM-related platform, but you can find something that is also, you know, relevant to your course, even if you're not teaching a STEM subject. Like in social psychology, there's many videos that are related to other fields as well. But I'm just going to open one within biology, and say I have this situation where I have a series of chapters. I want to see what a video could look like. Let's open one of the chapters and one of the videos that we've got here. So first thing that we mentioned, extremely important, is the accessibility. You can see that in this case, we've got a variety of different languages available for this particular video to be watched. This obviously allows us to have a variety of contexts in which the video can be viewed, previewed, or post-viewed. Say you want to watch it before the lesson, maybe acquire the jargon that you need to pull through, then it's an opportunity to actually know it in your own language, for example. If we want to watch it post-lesson or during the lesson, same concept applies. I remember having to transcribe some of the words my professors used to use in classroom and just like eyeing out somebody else's paper because I didn't know how to spell it, for example. This can be a useful tool in that sense. A video of this kind is a short one. So what I'm showing right now is a 20-second snapshot of an animated video, but obviously there's a variety of different options out there. Hopefully the audio will work in this case. Oh, it logged me out because I was inactive for too long listening to you guys. Sorry. I will just log back in. Meanwhile, another point that we touched upon is the fact that we should be trying to make sure that our students have the best experience in terms of what they're doing with the video. So yes, we're watching it, but what do we do afterwards? Here we are. So I can also activate maybe some German subtitles. Why not? So actually German language, and I'm going to English language, and I'm going to put the subtitles just down here, just to give you an idea.
Regulated, errors like non-disjunction arise that yield aneuploid cells with absent or extra chromosomes. Many non-disjunction incidents happen during meiosis I, although the mechanisms
and this tone of voice might not work for everybody. So again, speeding things up, making it slower, making it faster, another very important feature that you all mentioned. I think it's extremely relevant when a professor thinks, okay, what do I want to include? To think about that. Maybe I have an introductory course. People need to assimilate the concepts a bit more slowly. Let's slow the video down a little bit when I watch it with my students. Or vice versa. Oh, this is just revision. I want them to, in a second, revise the concepts that we've seen last year and then get this video and then crack on with the rest of everything that we've got. This can also be an option. Obviously, transcripts, another very important bit. You can expand on suggested reading. But what I would like to add is that any video, in this case, in our case, but I highly recommend that everybody does that in their own course, comes with some material that people can interact with. Now, if you watch a video on this platform, you can pair it up with a quiz. And every quiz has 3 simple multiple choice questions that you can select or modify however you want it. I highly encourage anybody who is working with multimedia, with videos, to add some activities to them. Not just have your students watch them, but have them scan a QR code and answer a question, one of the quizzes that you've got here if you want. have them raise their hand to some random question that you ask about the video 20 minutes later down the lecture, or have them create some extra material, maybe some slides using some screenshots from the video to explain other things. We've got a lot of material that can be used in 3D. Have them experiment with the videos to then implement things throughout the lecture. So that was just my 2 cents on what I think could be practically relevant to our audience. Now I would like to continue on with our discussion and ask you all a question about integration of multimedia. So multimedia can be integrated in a lecture, yes, can also be used beforehand or afterwards. What are some tips you would like to give to our audience when it comes to using these materials within something they've already created? You know, I already have a lecture plan. How do I integrate, and how important is it to integrate these videos within my lecture material? These videos, or any videos, or, you know, anything that you might find relevant. Robin, I would like to hear your opinion on that.
Sure. I'm going to come up with some different sorts of ideas. I think we don't lecture, so that's the one thing that we do. It's a lot of discussion, a lot of engagement. We would use the video for the lecture component if there was, or that kind of content thing, and then work off it. So that's just from education standpoint. But in terms of integrating video and multimedia in education, broadly speaking, I'm going to give ideas that are probably unusual to. So of course it can be used for explaining things and such, but we've used actually videos for huge. It's a tangential aspect for actually explaining assignments. And so that when students want to do things, they actually have the videos to explain how, you know, what is it I'm expecting. So it's a remarkable time saver. It's great for any kind of administrative class with activities if I have an administrative something for the students to do. It's again a different kind of, it's not instructional, but it really helps them out because we do a lot of online work. We use it unusual in ways for giving feedback to students. So these are different kinds of ways of on assignments they've done. For example, when you're doing a walkthrough, it's quite interesting. We have students co-creating things and creating videos, putting them on web pages, for example, discussing how to use learning tools, for example, so that they would create videos about how to use them, that sort of thing. So that's a way we've integrated. Creating online modules for case studies. So again, we don't go to a lecture mode. So it's going to be something where there's a module to actually get students thinking about something to discuss. Might be something more in Lester's area. I'm not sure in terms of where you would be talking about concepts in more depth. We've used a tool called Perusall, which people are probably maybe aware of, but it actually allows you to interact with a video and comment on the video as you would at certain points in a video and have discussion points in the video. You can use it for reading, but you can also use it for video. So imagine a video then that stops and says, I really don't understand that aspect. And another student can see that you've commented on it and they can jump in. So that's a way. I think you've mentioned this, but using interactive questions or maybe Logan mentioned this, interactive questions within the video. So as it goes along, you stop and the questions are sort of, so what do you think about this? It can be, we use it. There's lots of tools, Edpuzzles when we use, they can put comments or they can actually answer questions. So not waiting till the end of the video, but actually depending on the nature of the video. We've used it in really interesting ways with interactive designing with mathematics. So the teacher works through a problem on the video, and then there's a student problem on the video on the other side, and the video stops and says, okay, now you fill in the student part, and then they start working through the problem. So in terms of understanding. And then we're doing some stuff, but that's just started with AI design of videos, because that's now kind of a different component where I don't have to worry about my voice and stopping and all this kind of thing, I can actually concentrate on different aspects of teaching. So those are, I've deliberately picked things that are probably non-traditional, because I know that'll leave things for Logan and Lester to, refer to, because I just thought I'd try to pick some unusual ones, that the way we integrate videos.
I really appreciate that. And actually, I was worried nobody would mention AI today. So I was getting like ready to say something about it myself, but I'm glad you did. And I also agree that just as a side note, it can be a relief to use those tools, because then we can worry about other concepts, not
I imagine
how
for
the voice
Jove,
sounds.
it's got to be great. Like, because that,
Oh, I can't
yeah,
wait.
yeah.
I can't wait. Absolutely. Wonderful. Logan, Lester, the floor is yours, because actually, yeah, the order you prefer.
I can jump in, I guess. I'll give a couple of examples that I guess are a little bit different from my own research. We're interested in basically how can we use video to help students integrate multiple representations, right? So the instructor's explanations with visualizations usually, or maybe an example. And one of the things that we've found is that if you show this instructor create the drawing by hand, like of a visualization, like maybe in one of the videos you just showed, that students, we see better learning outcomes when you see somebody draw dynamically by hand while the instructor's explaining over top of it, than if you show students the exact same visual that's just already completed. Right. So little techniques like that, because it kind of incorporates kind of basic principles of directing attention, but also kind of a social component where you're observing, and maybe even an embodied component. You're observing somebody do a task or to complete a drawing, that is more engaging and directs your attention and allows you to kind of synchronize what the instructor's saying with what the instructor's doing. So that's just one kind of specific way to just improve the presentation of just a typical visualization or a diagram. I'll give another example. We've found benefits of showing a video from the first person perspective, from the student's perspective, if you're doing like a demonstration. So one study we did, we showed students how to build an electric circuit. And so we can record the video from the student's perspective, and you can see the hands coming out of the video as if they're your hands, or you can see it from more typical perspective, like a third person perspective, like as if you're across the table from somebody. And students learn better when they saw the video from their own first person perspective, so that they could sort of more easily imagine themselves doing the task. So that's just a kind of another maybe slightly different example. And I know Robin's mentioned having students create their own videos. And that's something that we also have done, where we have students essentially learn by teaching their peers. They create a little video lecture where they're explaining, but they're also often recording themselves draw. And so we can kind of get both benefits, right? There's a benefit of being the person creating the drawing and being the person explaining. There's also a benefit of the students observing the student draw and hearing the explanation. So those are just a few more kind of specific examples from kind of the studies that we've done in my lab.
I think the last one you mentioned is super, super interesting. The one, with different person visualizations. This is something actually I've encountered a few times. So on the platform, you'll find some videos that are not necessarily animated like the one that I showed, but there's people practicing things. And I also do really love it when the camera goes, say you're doing a titration or like a pipette or something, and the camera actually goes on top of that, and you can see the hands, like you were saying, performing the experiment as if it was your own hands. I think that's extremely, empirically, I always thought it was beneficial for somebody to have that. Now that there's research to show that, I actually feel even better about that. I feel like it's not just me now learning better that way. Lester, have you got anything that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I don't know how novel it's going to be. I think in some sense I'm echoing, I think, what we've already heard, but that's good for reinforcement. So, the way that I'll share how kind of what I do in class. So I have videos as a way to introduce a topic. So the ways that might show up is I'll actually say in the syllabus, watch this before coming to class, or watch this before doing the reading. And what it does is it just introduces and highlights kind of the main concepts that are important for me, so that they just get thinking about it. It's kind of a way to prime them, I think. The video is short. I think that's important. And so I guess part of what my answer is kind of what not to do with video. Not all videos are the same. And one mistake that used to be made quite a bit in my opinion is that instructors would share very long videos. And I think that, with rare exceptions, that produces a lot of fatigue. It's kind of hard, I think, to stay engaged and focused. So short videos, I think, offer something that's particularly useful. So this kind of priming use of videos that I just talked about. Then I also have after class, after the reading, as a kind of a summary and reinforcement mechanism of videos. So you've done the more complicated readings. Maybe you have a lot of different ideas floating around and you're having a hard time. They're still there somewhere, but you're having a hard time kind of placing them on scaffolding. Now you can watch a video that will, again, highlight some of the important areas and maybe provide you a framework so that you can start to digest, I guess, for lack of a better expression, some of those ideas a little bit more. But then, so that's the front end and the back end. And then I use videos, short videos in class, in talking. And as has already been discussed, is we'll stop the video after some new idea or important idea has been introduced. And then I do what's called a think, pair, share, where I'll have 3 or 4 students kind of get together and discuss what are the implications that maybe weren't covered in the video. What are the implications of that idea in this other, I'll give them a specific thing to kind of wrestle with during class. But I'll leave it there. So it's before, it's after, and it's during class, but used in very different ways.
That's actually something that we've been discussing quite a lot in the past few years, because during COVID, a lot of people started just saying, we're going to use the videos to replace parts of what we do. And those who were doing it beforehand, they knew exactly what the difference between those 3 stages are, and they could actually implement them much more successfully. So I recommend everybody actually try to do that. They try different strategies. They don't just say, I'm going to put up a video here and see if my students watch it, but say, okay, what about preparation? Do I want them to come in and have a general idea of what we're going to discuss today? Let's give it a go. Or actually, let's see if their retention is higher once we've explained the concepts. Let's see if by giving them a video at the end, they can retain those concepts more easily. I think a big takeaway there is definitely let's give it a go with different strategies, not just one. I would also like to remind the audience, by the way, that you can ask your own questions in the chat box, because we're now going to move on to that part of more interactive session, where if you've got any ideas, anything you'd like to share, you can. But we have received one question in the meantime that I'd like to ask you all, which is related to what Lester was saying, actually, of what not to do. So is there anything that you should not be doing if you're considering inserting videos, inserting multimedia in your educational contexts? Anybody who'd like to share? I'll leave it up to you.
And a ton of things. I'm sure Logan does as well. Go ahead, Logan.
I can start us off. I mean, we've mentioned some of them. Video, too long videos that are too long. Definitely, research suggests that if you break up, segment videos into smaller chunks, that students learn better, especially when you put little activities in between. So having, if you're one to, record your classroom lecture and just post it online, it's an hour and a half long and nothing in between, that's not likely to be super effective. Another one would be something called seductive details in the research, which is there's a tendency, we want to kind of, spice up the video and include a bunch of interesting things and funny pictures and decorative, fancy animations and all that. But it turns out that a lot of times that information, attracts students' attention, distracts them, and they end up remembering that stuff, but not the actual learning content. So removing, at least minimizing some of the extraneous information that can also often be presented in videos is a big one. And then another common one, I'm sure, especially if you're using, PowerPoint or something, putting excessive text on the screen is a big issue where really in video, you have the opportunity to take advantage of the actual affordances of video, which is, you can present a visualization as you're using your words orally, which we know the integration of the spoken words with visual information is really beneficial. But if you're placing a bunch of redundant text on the screen with what you're saying, then students are focusing on that and they're not able to make the right connections with, and you're not really taking advantage of the power of visualizations, which is what video can be really good for. So I'll leave it at that. I would say, yeah, reducing seductive details, breaking long videos into smaller chunks, and focusing on the actual unique affordance of a video in the, presenting, well-designed visualizations.
Thank you for those, Logan. Actually, somebody commented on what you were just saying now, and they said that short videos for complicated concepts can really help. I think they're speaking from their own experience. This person, anonymous attendee, also says, I understand now that videos by chapter is not very thrilling for students, and I imagine that would be, the long videos that basically cover the entirety of a lecture in 45 minutes, which even just by saying it can be a little bit daunting, to be honest. Great. Thank you. Robin, I know you've got something.
Yeah, I've done some research and trying to, what are the optimal design features that you put in there, and Logan's quite right. That summarizes quite a few of them. But there's sort of little things sometimes that people don't consider about even focus of a title and getting someone in the context of what's actually happening. And that doesn't always happen. People kind of jump in and it's like, well, what is it you're talking about? Highlighting certain things, because sometimes we're looking at a screen, you've got a visual there, and I know this is important, and you can say, well, this is really important here. Well, in your head, you're looking at this, but you're actually not moving the pointer over there or highlighting and stuff, so that actually the person doesn't know what you're talking about. The extraneous variables, because you do want to reduce it is kind of about cognitive load. And if you start just dumping, that's why the short videos, they become more essential, because how much am I packing in here for someone to take in? And so you have to be pretty careful about that. So that means speed, and speed's a hard thing to figure out. We can control speed, so that's good, right? Because is it the speed with which a beginner's looking at it, or the speed with which an advanced user, and they want to tend to, so the speed thing is really important. So you try to, but we can control that to a certain extent. One thing, a bit of a bugaboo for me, you see in a lot of videos, which is unusual, is background music. So that the background music is there. It is entertaining. It may be, however, you would never go in front of a class and say, I'm going to start talking about, I'm going to put on some music here. It would be really unusual to do that. So why are we doing that on a video because that's what we see in entertainment videos. And these are different videos. We're not necessarily, well, maybe we want to influence our class, but we're not going to be influencers per se, in terms of, although I will say one of my videos when I made it for a class, when you make a really unusual video that no one watches, it's kind of like the panda. And so it's like, oh, it becomes a popular video for some odd reason. So I would say discourage yourself from putting too much entertainment, and Logan is dead on. These are visuals. Talk about it. People want to, and that's really important. It's also the conversational tone. If I'm talking to you as a class, that's a whole different thing than if I'm talking to you as a person. And I tend to, when I ask students to create it, pretend you're actually just tutoring this one person. Pretend you're, and then they feel like, oh, okay, this person's talking to me. It's different. It's a very different context than you're saying class, And I've listened to a lot of these when students create them. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that does take a different tone. So those are some of the anecdotal things that I would add. So.
They're all very good points, actually. And do you know that feeling when there's a huge audience and you're feeling like they're really talking to you? That hits a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
more strongly and more positively for sure.
Khan
We've got
Academy does it beautifully, right? Those
It's true.
videos, you just feel like the guy's there. He's drawing it. He's making jokes
That's
about,
for me.
yeah.
Absolutely. We've got a couple more questions from the audience, but before we move on to that, I just wanted to show the difference between two videos that I think are similar to what you discussed. First of all, I'm very glad to say I am not going to show a video with any background music because I would find that quite disturbing when I'm learning, and I never actually thought about that until now. But yeah, the video we saw earlier, very briefly, had some concepts in biology. This is a physics one. I'm not going to put the audio there, just the subtitles while I speak on top of that. But I think some of the elements that you mentioned, the fact that it's short, it's 1 minute, it can be straight to the point, it can guide the conversation through some specifics. It makes it apt for different occasions. Say we want to show, like Lester was saying earlier, we want to show it before class. We want the students to know what we're going to discuss, what we're going to talk about. It's not a burden. It's a 1 minute video. Hopefully they're going to get the gist, and then we can move on and delve into the details. It's just a taster of what we can then go more in depth with. Or I can do what I'm doing right now. I can show it to my class and I can talk on top of that. Instead of the theory of the video, I can talk about the concept that is being expressed there. But in that case, it becomes more of a visual aid to what I'm trying to convey to my students. And a second example that I wanted to show is more similar to what Logan was actually mentioning, the fact that we can have different viewpoints. And I couldn't find the exact example that I wanted to mention. But in this case, we have, let me just find the correct subtitles. Whoop. But in this case, we've got a person, the camera is not spot on from the top of their hands, but you can still see how it gets super close to what they're actually performing. It gets, from this viewpoint, for example, exactly what you would see if you were the one turning that lever. So you can actually get to have a little bit of a personalization, even if it's a video that is meant for a big audience. That's what I wanted to convey. I think that's a very, very important point that we're touching upon, the fact that it has to feel personable. It has to feel like it's talking to you as an individual, through the close-up, through the tone, more than a class of 300 people all sitting and listening to the same conversation over and over and over again. So yeah, just wanted to show a couple of examples of what we've said that anybody can find on the platform if they want to log in, if they want to have a look. Everything is obviously available there. One final question, because I do think we have maybe 5 minutes to spare. Somebody is saying, for online classes, discussion post videos can be useful if they're designed well. Can one of you, does any one of you have any experience creating videos that engage students in an online discussion platform? And they say, I would have used TikTok if I did not come with issues of confidentiality and so on. I don't know if anybody has any insights into this discussion platform type of situation.
Well, yeah, I'll just mention, I mean, we use Perusal for that. That it literally was designed for that. It's free. MIT has it. And so you post the video and then students can comment and discuss any aspect of the video that they wish. So they jump in, they can respond. So it's almost social viewing of things in the sense, but very specific. It's not just a comment about the video. It's actually a comment about certain aspects of the video. That's probably the ideal kind of discussion scenario. There are other ways you can do it. But you do run into the problem of, that's probably one of the better ones, because you run into the problem of discussion boards in general. You know, we force students to do this, or we can for grades. We can't read out everything they write. they see it, we see it. It becomes a check on the reading, kind of, and so it's not genuine interaction. But perusal is actually, it works pretty well that way. The other suggestion is just make much smaller groups, so that they can actually genuinely interact with whatever they wanted to do. You need a tool like Perusal though to say, because again, it's visual. So it's like on minute 152, I noticed this. Is someone going to do that? Whereas they can actually see it. That's the experience I've had.
I'll just mention something very quickly, and it may not be relevant because I think this may be a case where it's relevant for social science and humanities more than other disciplines. Certainly education, I think it would be relevant for in some respect, but there's this idea in social science, it's very difficult to communicate, I think, to freshmen, younger students in particular. Sometimes it gets called the sociological imagination, but it's really relevant, I think, broadly. And what it is it's the idea of we experience life from a first person perspective. And so we're kind of seeing it in that narrow way. But if you go up a level to the level of an institution or say a society as a whole, there's all these dynamics that are happening, which will continue to happen irrespective of what you may want as an individual. And one very key thing to try to teach is how do you teach students to kind of make sense of their lives from that bigger vantage point, like the sorts of things that happen to them, like a downturn in the economy that produces mass unemployment. It's not a failure necessarily of their own individual motivation, which is why they lost their job. So this is the idea. Video is really useful for this because it allows the typical storytelling with a narrative format can very often take the vantage point of a main character. It's from their point of view, and you can see them moving through life, but then you can also have information given about what's happening historically kind of around them. And I think that there's a way that the tension is relieved between what the individual can do and what circumstances are going to do. It is often relieved in really good storytelling. And so if you can find a 5 or 10 minute clip, 10 minute probably tops, that does that, and they're really, you can go to documentaries and you can take excerpts out of motion pictures, and then structure a thread of a conversation based on that, you can see where you're not, like we've been talking about some very specific and mechanical sorts of videos where this is how you do this. But what I've just explained is very open-ended. There's definitely a process that you're thinking through, but it's open to how you talk about it, how you make sense of that connection. And I think that question answer sort of thread in an online class can really help students process that information and come up with, make sense of it. And so that's one way that I use video in that sort of context.
Which is, by the way, what we're doing here in this webinar. Like, I can't not talk about how meta this is, because people are asking us questions, we're interacting with them. It will probably yield a different result than if everybody just sat and watched and didn't retain as much information. So I think, yeah, that's extremely true. So thanks everybody for asking your questions. I don't know if you want to answer this question as well, Logan, if you've got something you'd like to add just to finish off before we wrap up the session.
No, I don't have anything to add to that one. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, we are finishing 5 minutes before, just to allow everybody to get on with the rest of their commitments. I know finishing on the clock is always an issue if you need to move to a different lecture theatre or do something else. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to host this panel discussion and get some insights from people who work with videos literally every day, and they do research on the actual impact that these videos have. You can contact us at any point. Everybody everybody who's registered for this webinar will receive an email with a recording of the event. You can rewatch it. You can contact me directly. You can answer the emails that you will receive. But you can also, I think, potentially engage in more conversations. The speakers that we had today are thought leaders in their own sector, and they have been doing research in all of their respective fields. So anything that they have shared with us today, I think, is precious and can be brought to your own classroom, as well as, you know, more and more practical things that you can find online. But I think this is a great starting point, the one that we got today. So thanks everybody again for joining me today, and I wish you a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.